Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Then look no further than NAST Studios, located in Seattle's Pioneer Square. Hi, I'm Blake. I'm the owner, in-house producer, and editor. We've got 3 cameras to capture every moment and can host up to 8 mics, ensuring your podcast looks and sounds professional. We've got affordable pricing for podcasters at all levels. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.naststudios.com. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today I'm with a very special guest, and honestly, the reason why I'm in podcasting in the first place. This guest is originally a co-host of the KISW show with Bob Rivers. He is the general manager of KMIH 80.9, and also the radio teacher, and also a radio host for the station now too, right?
Well, I just started. I decided, Blake, and thank you for having me. By the way, and I loved having you as a student, and now I'm so proud of what you've done here. And I started doing Joe's class, the only high school class where the lessons are taught live on the radio. And I'm going to start doing that just once a week because I realized I can sit in the classroom and I can show videos and I can lecture and I can, tell you all kinds of things about media. But the way to really learn how to do it is to get in there and do it. So I model it by going live on the air with a couple different students, and we'll be putting out 1 episode a week. And mostly it'll be to highlight the students. I'm the teacher. The real stars are the students, and it's just a little platform to brag on them a little bit.
But yeah, this is Joe Bryant, Downtown Joe, and it's crazy because I haven't had too many radio hosts on the show, right? And it's just, you get used to saying like podcast titles, and then just like you forget about all the different radio dials. It's
terrestrial radio. A lot of people are forgetting, and it's it's not. I won't say that it's. The business is booming in terrestrial radio. There's a transformation. Mm-hmm. And it's guys like you that are, going to be paving the way. Audio will always be, I think, very important. I think
sure.
Podcasting is right now. We've been telling stories since cavemen were drawing on walls, talking about the big kills they had, the big storms that came. There's always been people to tell stories in a community, and be it on the radio, be it on the internet, be it around a campfire. So while terrestrial radio may be down a little bit, the art of broadcasting is very healthy, alive and well.
Yeah, I definitely say I got my start in radio, and basically my only real radio experience is being part of your class. But I did work for 92.5. I was never on the air there, except when I did my own podcast at the station, which was obviously it was a cool experience because when I first graduated, I needed to find a way to, get my podcast up and going. So my pitch to a lot of touring artists was I work at this radio station and you could record at the station. So
you bet. There's something about a set of call letters and a frequency that means a lot to musicians, and it means a lot to publicists. And we have students now that are just getting the biggest names and all these, really, we're not getting Taylor Swift on the air, not yet at least, but just yesterday, one of my students is interviewing Artemis Powell. He's the founding member of Lynyrd Skynyrd, the only one left. And
wow. Are they in town?
No, he was talking to him about a new record he was working on and some stuff, and Paul Rogers and Arlo Guthrie, and these are older people that just one student is getting, but he's getting those people because they're going to be on the radio in Seattle. Mm-hmm. They're going to be on the radio in the number 12 market, and they don't know they're going to be on the radio with a high school kid on a 30-watt station. All they know is they're going to be on the radio in Seattle. So there's, you can ask people to be on your podcast and things, which is great, but having a terrestrial signal, especially with older artists and stuff, means something. So
yeah, because it's like a legacy. It's like an established thing, and that's what all podcasters, I guess, hope to be. And what's interesting, though, a lot of, even with my studio and my goals, a lot of podcast studios have in-house podcasts that are come in every week, right? So one of my favorite podcasts is it's called Your Mom's House, and basically on Your Mom's House, it's by Tom Segura, who's a comedian, and his wife, and that's the main podcast on their channel, but then they feature other podcasts, and there's like up to like I think 5 other podcasts on that podcast network now, because there's podcast networks,
Right.
which is starting to which is obviously almost directly related to a radio station when there's various shows on that radio station.
Yep, and we have that. We use transistor.fm to build our little network. So if you go to KMIH.org, which is our website, you get to listen to the radio station live, but you can also click on shows, and there's all kinds of podcasts. Mine, but the really good ones are the students' podcasts, and there's a couple dozen to choose from there.
So how do you know if like a student has like maybe like a future in media? Is it just like how much they pay attention in class, or like how can, like, I guess it's funny because I really relate my experience in your class to one of those obviously it's way different because it's Mercer Island, but those like inner city movies where it's like, oh fuck, there's one I'm forgetting, but like there's like the inspirational inner city movies where that one teacher believes in that kid, and that kid ends up going to like the NFL or NBA or whatever, right? I relate that to being in your class and me being like, I could actually be in radio or actually be a podcaster. So you really inspired me. So, but as someone who's in that position, when do you know if that's actually happening, if you actually have that connection with a student or not?
Well, you never really know. And frankly, with you, Blake, you were only in my program for a year.
Yeah.
That's why I was really so thrilled to see that you did get a little spark and you continued. Our program now, we have about 150 students. I have 6 classes, and thank goodness I have a co-teacher, Natalie Woods, who helps me. And I don't expect all 150 of those students to want to be in media. And maybe only a small handful will be. And frankly, I won't say I don't care. That doesn't sound like the right way. What I really love is to see engagement and growth. There are some students who have real challenges even with just speaking. I mean, and to see those students get more confident at it, that's as much as what my class and teaching is about, is putting people in the industry. But there are people who just can't get enough. I listened to a live show coming down here to do this podcast with you. And these are students coming in after school, not for a grade, not for, anything that is going to, be an incentive in the grade book. They're doing it because they enjoy it. And it's like football or anything. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. And they're putting in their reps and they're putting in their time. And I get frustrated because not every kid is that way, but I have to remember, if I can connect with, even one student, one DJ Blake, one Mariner Max. There was a student about your age, Max Tanzer, he's professional baseball play-by-play announcer. He's working with the Minnesota Twins organization. That's what he always wanted to do. He worked very hard at it, and that's what he's doing. Natalie Newcomb is another student. She's a reporter for NPR, and her dream since she was a little girl, riding around in the back of her dad's car listening to KUOW, was to be on KUOW, and that's what she's doing now. So I don't know if I can identify it right off the bat, but I do. I know talent when I hear it, but it takes a lot more than talent. It takes a little bit of tenacity, a lot of, wanting to put in the reps, wanting to put in the time. And that's even beyond school. I worked, in commercial radio for 25 years. And I worked with a lot of talented people. But the ones who really seemed to really get very successful were not only talented, but they were also people you wanted to work with. They were, people who, you just want to be around, and the audience picks up on that too. So I think part of what I spot is not only are you talented, but do you take direction? Do you listen to what I have to say? Do you have suggestions? Are you eager to maybe redo some things? Somebody will record a public service announcement or something. Some people I will say, it would really sound great if you added this or did that. And the ones that go, yeah, you're right, and they get right in there and do it, then you go, yeah. And then there's others that, but I already turned that assignment in. I've checked that box. I'm moving on to my math homework here,
Right.
you know? And then you go, okay, well, that's fine too. So,
Yeah. I guess because some people do treat it like a PE class or like
right.
extra.
Yeah. It's a class where, you know, you create your own rigor, I guess, to
Mhm.
use an education speak. It's, it can be as challenging as you make it and as rewarding as you make it. And some people have accepted the challenge and really go for it. And we're starting to see the rewards come with people like yourself who are now have found a kind of a lifelong direction and passion just from one little high school radio class.
Which is lucky though, because not a lot of like schools are even have a radio station, right? There's like Mercer Island and Nathan Hale. Maybe there's some other ones popping up.
That's,
like,
you know, somebody asked me today, where our high school radio stations in our area, and I started at Bellevue High. I'm another guy who I got a little spark, a guy named Bill Poyer, and I started high school radio. That was my first call letters. It was KASB, and it's still going. And then you've got KNHC is just a huge radio station at Nathan Hale, very popular. And then there's us. And that's really in Western Washington about all that's left right now as far as terrestrial high school radio stations.
Did you grow up in Washington? Because I thought you were from Mississippi.
I was born in Mississippi. I moved here when I was 10.
Okay.
And I graduated from Newport High School.
Oh, wow.
And but I went to Bellevue High for radio. It was like one of those deals. Like Bellevue had an auto shop. It had a radio station. If you want to work on a car or talk on the radio, you would go to Bellevue for, you know, a couple hours. If you wanted to build a house, you go to Newport. They had a construction thing. So I took the vocational class at Bellevue High, but I'm a Newportite. If people in the Seattle area know, that's where I graduated.
That's so wild because it's funny because a lot of my friends have just recently started graduating from college, right? And like you see, like these are people that you know person to person, and they're becoming teachers or whatever. And but then as a student, obviously, students don't realize that teachers are just people too, to be honest, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's funny to like be graduated from Mercer Island and then be talking to you and being like, oh wow, you definitely had a life outside of being my teacher and other people's teacher.
Oh yeah.
You know, so like I hope what people get out of this episode is like personalizing you, like people being like you've had a journey that led you to being in radio and then you wanting to, whether you knew that was going to be your calling or not, to be a radio teacher even.
And let me tell you, it wasn't an immediate calling. In fact, if I put myself in a category as a radio student, I might have been one of those guys of, I don't really want to redo that. I'm moving on. It wouldn't have been to my math homework. It would have been to something else maybe. But I was not a super engaged student at any level. That's when somebody said you should become a teacher, I'm like, you sure? School was never really was my expertise. And I never had a driven, I'm going to be on the radio when I was in high school. It was just a class I enjoyed. I went to Central Washington. I had a radio show there. It was just a class I enjoyed. Then I worked. I managed a gas station. I worked at a truck stop. I traveled a lot. I didn't get really my first radio job till 1990, and I graduated high school in 1981. So it took me 9 years to even really decide, okay, I better get serious about something. I've always enjoyed being in a radio station. Let me see if I can get an internship or something. And that's when I started. So it's not like I knew right off the bat this was my destiny. It took some exploration.
Dang. Was your did your family not push you in any direction? Like, what was like your family like?
They didn't pressure me. My parents got divorced when I was 10 or maybe 11 or so. We moved here from the South. Thank goodness. I'm glad they moved here and then decided to get divorced, or I'd still be down in Mississippi or Tennessee. No offense to anybody that lives there, but I like it here. And so I had I had a mom and I had a dad that didn't live together, so I had two houses. Didn't have a lot of oversight from either. Don't get me wrong. Both loved me very much. In fact, everybody talks about how bad divorce is. For me, it was like, well, I have two refrigerators of food. I have two beds. When one gets mad at me, I can go to the other one and they're not going to be that mad. I mean, it wasn't a terrible life, don't get me wrong. But I did raise myself a little bit. I was kind of a latchkey kid and nobody was pushing me that you must go to a four-year college. You must keep your grades up. You know, I kind of was given the freedom to find my own way and the support. You know, I've really been lucky in that way that my dad was a civil engineer and we were never a wealthy family, but
Mm.
we had, I've always been comfortable, and so I kind of did get to feel my way around. And I discovered this guy named Jerry Garcia when I was a kid, and he was a guitar player for the Grateful Dead. And I decided my job was going to be to follow him around for a while.
I just learned they made the Cherry Garcia Ben and Jerry's ice cream because of him.
Oh,
Did
yeah,
you
because
know
of
that?
Jerry.
I had no
Yeah,
idea that was the reason.
So I went to my first Dead show in high school, and it's
Oh my
like, okay,
gosh.
that's going to be my career, is following the Grateful Dead. So
Oh my
so
gosh.
those 9 years that I wasn't exactly lost, but I was doing some wandering. I was doing a lot of New Year's Eve shows in San Francisco and going to Red Rocks, and basically, I wasn't getting super serious about a career. I was out enjoying myself, traveling. I went to Europe, to New Zealand.
Wow.
I would work long enough to save some money, and then I would go and spend it, and then I would find another job, and I'd work long enough to save some money. And that was kind of a short-term thinking. I didn't have a strategic lifelong plan until I
Wow.
got a little older.
There is something about to that though, because like for me, I have decided not to follow like the standard route of like even having like a 40-hour a week job. Like when I'd rather have 3 jobs that entertained me versus having one job or was to
Yep.
the. But with that, like I graduated in 2019, right? So like that's 5 years. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it'll be 5 years coming
That's
up.
craziness. But like, yeah, that's 5 years of literally like my head to the ground focusing on what I wanted to do. Like I got hired by 92.5 while in high school still. And like I followed that and which led me into podcasting. But since high school, I've only focused on media, right? So now I'm able to like be in my own space, but I feel like I keep getting into like a cycle of like feeling like I need inspiration and not from like a corny like artist perspective being like I need to know the meaning of life. It's more of like I feel like I'm just so zoned in that it's kind of like isolating and I want to explore and have new perspectives because my perspective of just working on what I love to get here is awesome, but then like what's next? Obviously my next thought is okay, I need to get more clients and I'm just like business oriented, but like I really don't have I went to coffee with one of my friends who's like a Seattle Times writer, and they were talking about having, I think it's called a third place, where like I think your first place is your home, your second place is like your work or something, and your third place is like a place where it's just a place for you to enjoy yourself.
Right.
And like whether it's going to the gym or going to concerts or whatever, but anything that I end up enjoying, I've turned into like a profession, right? I like music, so I became a DJ. I randomly came across like WWE wrestling stuff that now I'm producing the wrestling podcast in Seattle at Washington Hall once a month. I love comedy, so now I started going on comedy tours with comedians and filming them. So I think there is something though to like maybe not obviously you want to have a path but you found your path later on.
Yeah.
But like you're able to like explore and just be like I want to follow the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have that for some reason.
And I didn't figure out how to make it at a living, but you're following a perfect path, Blake, because one thing my dad told me is, whatever you decide to do something you really enjoy because you're going to be doing a lot of it probably for a long time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think about, with jobs and careers, it's like, what's going to pay me the most? What's going to be the most secure? Yes, those things are nice. But if it's something that you are not happy with, if you're spending 8 hours of your life miserable and another 8 hours of your life sleeping, talking about that third place,
Yeah.
maybe you have 8 hours where you can go to your corner bar or your gym or whatever, where you find some relaxation. But I'd prefer to get out of bed excited every morning to go to whatever it is that I'm doing for a living, no matter what it pays. And that's one thing about teaching. I'm not complaining. It's, certainly a good job and a secure job. But if I wanted to focus on just, income. There's probably things you could do to make more,
Right.
but the pay is people like yourself. There's students that are, that you can inspire. And if a couple of those thank you on the way out of the classroom, and even better, if a couple of those come back
Yeah.
a couple or 3 years later, which I'd love to invite you back to talk to my students. They find you very inspiring. That's my pay, and that's why I've been blessed. I've very few days of my life have I worked. I spent 25 years doing morning radio, which, yes, it's very challenging. It is hard work, but it really wasn't. Getting paid to entertain people and to do what you love, and then now being paid to teach others to do that and to inspire them. I don't feel like I really spent a lot of my time working.
That's amazing. So with that, how'd you get into working at the radio station? You started as an intern?
Yes.
Right?
In 1990, I went to a vocational school, National Broadcasting School, and they were having a TV campaign saying they were giving out scholarships. Come and audition. And I went to audition, and they said, well, we got good news, bad news. Bad news is you didn't win the scholarship. But the good news is, if you sign this paper, there's this thing called a Pell Grant. The government will pay $3,000, and you pay $3,000, and for $6,000, we'll make you a radio star. Which $6,000 in 1989 was pretty significant chunk of change. So I was working at a little coffee shop up on Aurora Avenue called Surreal Espresso. And a guy named Bob Rivers and Sean Donahue had come to town. They hadn't even gone on the air yet. They'd come here from Baltimore, and they were coming to the coffee shop because my friend Michael McMorrow, who I went to college with, was their first producer in bringing them. So I told Sean very excitedly, I said, I signed up for radio school. And he said, you did what? And I said, I signed up for this National Broadcasting School. He goes, dude, I can't believe you did that. That is way too much money. He goes, I guess we're going to have to make you an intern. So I started as their intern at KISW January 2nd, 1990. I'll still never forget that day. And I wound up working with Bob for 25 years. I went from intern to co-host. And I have a really weird radio story because a lot of people go from town to town, and you start in Yakima or somewhere and you work your way to a bigger market. I got to essentially broadcast in my home in Seattle pretty much my whole career. I mean, we spent a little time syndicated into other cities and stuff, but for the most part, I worked with the same people. We switched stations a little so we could get a raise here and there, but got to stay where I love, the city of Seattle, and do that for 25 years.
So break down for people who haven't heard of that radio station. What were the topics you guys would cover? What was it based around?
Our show it was the Bob Rivers Show with Bob, Spike, and Joe, and we started at KISW for 10 years. Then we were on KZOK for 10 years, and then we were on KJR FM, which is now. It's called the Jet. In fact, they started the Jet the day we left. It was KJR FM, and we had a variety show. We did, and it evolved. I mean, in 1990, it sounded a lot different than it did in 2010 or in 2000. But we mostly did a talk show, variety show. Lots of guests. We'd have a couple or three guests a day. Comedy, if you were going to put one word on it, we tried to be funny. I mean, that was our premise. We did a lot of song parodies for Atlantic Records, Twisted Christmas, and a lot of songs. And actually, I'm very proud. We're put into the Radio Hall of Fame in 2023, this last class.
Yes.
Yeah, the Bob Rivers Show. Now, this is mostly Bob. Bob had a great career before I even met him. He was in Boston and Baltimore.
Is he older than you, or?
Yeah, he's a little bit older. But it was very nice of Bob because when the Radio Hall of Fame induction, he insisted on it being the Bob Rivers Show on the trophy, and we all went to New York. And while Bob made the speech, he had us all stand up and take a bow. And I thought that was really good because not too many people in Seattle market, we're not small market, but we're not New York and LA. I mean, the other people in there, Shadow Stevens and all these guys that were big syndicated names. So I like to think we were a show that was edgy yet family oriented. We were something. One of our bosses, Lisa Decker, said our show was sticky. That once you listen, kind of like flypaper, I guess,
Okay.
you kind of stick, and
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose of a good morning radio show, is to get you to keep that dial in one place, and then it will stick there for the rest of the day, and it'll still be there when you get in the car the next morning. And that was kind of our mission. We were three guys with families. I didn't have a family in the beginning, but that's the other part. We raised our family on the radio. My daughter Emily was essentially born on the air. The first thing I did after she was born was get out there and make a call into the station to let everybody know that she had arrived. And so that's kind of it was a unconventional show. It's hard to put a label on it, but I would say comedy, variety, and real community oriented.
What would you say like your job was on the show? I recently had Jose from 92.5, and I think he's the third mic. And his job is kind of to be like the reaction, laughy guy.
Right.
What would you say your job
Well,
was?
I was that guy for a lot of the time. I didn't start as that guy. I was a producer. Well, I was an intern. And then they called me Downtown Joe because the first thing they had me doing was doing street stuff. I would go out to a different downtown every day, and we'd do a bit called phone booth trivia. There aren't even phone booths now. You couldn't do this. But I would call in from a phone booth, and I would say, I'm sitting here in Fife, right across the street from the city jail. First person who comes here gets to play phone booth trivia. And then the answer would always be C. So everybody knew that listened to us regularly, the answer was C. And I would write the questions, and, C was always the joke answer, and we would try to write some jokes with this. But that's the way I started, was producer and street team. I was booking the guests. I was answering the request lines and putting, the callers on the air. And Buzz Anderson, a great guy, he was an engineer at KISW. He said, when you're sitting back there, because I was at a desk most of the time, you laugh. It's pretty funny. You've got a pretty funny laugh. He goes, I'm going to put a microphone. So you'll have a microphone just in case you want to come. And I got to thank Buzz maybe for me being a co-host eventually, because Buzz put a microphone in. Yeah. So then Bob could call me up. I never had a place to sit or anything, but he could call me up and say, Joe, what are you working on? I could report and stuff. And then I was told I had a pretty good laugh. It was like Barney Rubble. I don't know if you've seen the Flintstones.
Yeah.
Everybody thought, oh, he sounds like Barney Rubble. It's so cute. So then they wanted me on the mic the whole time. And then I got too busy to be driving around to phone booths.
Yeah.
And then eventually.
Wait, for the phone booth real quick, like people would actually show up?
Oh, yeah. I don't think you could do this now, because it was sometimes, if the prize was big enough, it could be dangerous. Like, we're giving away a VCR, which back in those days, VCR was a big deal. All of a sudden, you hear trucks come screaming in, it's like a little bit of a liability probably, just to have people racing to you to get to you.
There was something about that, though, like the real organic interaction with that, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like building a podcast, like I've been doing this for 4 years now, and like there's some interviews that hit and they get thousands of views, and there's still some that are in the tens of views. It just really depends on like what we're talking about and who the guest is, right? So it's interesting, and like everyone can be their own radio host, their own artist, their own influencer, but to have that like real actual like interaction with people, there's something with that's missing now. And then like people have told me to like even go on the street and do things, right? So that goes back to like what we were originally talking about with like the more things change, the more they stay the same, with like how there's podcast networks just like there's radio networks, etc.
Yeah, and there's a ton of great bits out there in the street. There's a little bit of danger too, but Jay Leno has his jaywalking, or did, and he's retired now. And just like you're saying, some things hit, some things don't. If I went out, and I'd drive to Arlington. I would drive way out in the sticks. And when I called in from Arlington or Yelm or somewhere, half the city would come. I mean, it was a party. When I called in from where we are in downtown Seattle, Pioneer Square or something, I could be sitting there. They'd play 2 songs. Still nobody's come because Seattle people are too busy and too cool to go see some guy at a phone booth. So that bit was kind of hit and miss too. And the further I went, it seemed like the more excited people were to see me, and that's kind of
Yeah.
KISW in general. It's a suburb. And still is to this day, I assume. The wide tires. It's the south end. It's the north end more than downtown
Got
kind of
it.
thing.
Okay, so then you started doing that, and then you got promoted to becoming the third mic, right? There's only ever been 3 people on that show.
Well, no, we've
Okay.
had a lot of people on the show over the years. We always had 3 people, and then we had a news person.
Okay.
And the first news person that was my biggest mentor, Bob Rivers, and Jim Campman was his name, and he taught at Green River College for a long time. Campy's passed on, but what an amazing talent, and he taught me so much. In fact, he married me. I mean, he officiated my wedding, I should say. But I was the third mic, and then we've had different great news people. Casey Aitchison, who went on to TV at Q13. Jody Brothers, who's still on the air now, still where we left her at 9. Or actually, I think she's still at 95.7 there. Maura Gallucci. But the way my evolution went was I was the third mic, but I was still the producer. And I was making promos after the show every day. I was booking the guests. I was doing everything. And I was working myself into the ground. And I didn't mind. But one day I told Bob, he kind of got on me for not having something prepared, or I said something that wasn't what he wanted said. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, I'm starting to listen to the show now as a producer. I'm looking for the promo. I'm already thinking about what do I have to do after work. And I'm thinking in edit points and stuff. And he goes, well, I don't want you thinking that way. I just want you thinking creative and being funny. So we got to figure this out. So then we hired a producer, and I became co-host. And then by the way, producer for at least back in those days in radio language was not very well. It was the definition of producer is low pay. I mean, when you get to co-host and they go, oh, you're talent. Then I started getting the cat food commercials and the casino deals and all that, because then I was talent. As a producer, you don't get that stuff.
Dang.
So then that was in the I guess mid-90s, I became the co-host. And then, so for 20 of the 25 years, I was kind of the third banana. But like you said with Jose, I was third. Bob and Spike could do the majority of the talking, and I would sit back and wait for my moment. And usually it's a moment to shine when they needed either a punchline or they needed, some kind of observation after they've mined through a topic and they've said about all they can say. I could bring in a fresh perspective and then keep it rolling a little bit.
Do you ever think about was it like the universe telling you to be a radio host, or do you think it was just luck, or what do you think it was?
I think it was doing what you're doing, Blake. Thinking about what do I like and where do I want to hang out, and what what do I want to do. I didn't think I wanted to be a radio host. And going back to where I met Bob was at this espresso shop called Surreal Espresso. And the reason I liked working there was because it was a kind of a throwback shop even at that time. And we sponsored the Grateful Dead Hour on KZOK. That was a whole nother story. Is my boss, Keith, who is just amazing. He told them, well, we'll sponsor it, but I want my barista to do the commercials. He used to do radio in high school. If you'll let him do the commercials, I'll write the checks. And so I was hanging out with Keith up at the espresso shop. We were doing the Grateful Dead Hour, and then I met Bob, and one thing led to another. And that's where I tell a lot of students and a lot of people, it's like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know. I said, well, if you don't know, get in a place where you're going to meet a lot of people, because maybe this isn't your dream job, but maybe the person you meet might be the person that points you in the direction of your dreams.
Yes.
So I knew I liked music. I liked hanging out. I liked talking to people. I wasn't big on alcohol, I liked coffee. So this was like, okay, I'm hanging out at a coffee shop. I'm getting to listen to the music I want. We had a dartboard. I'm playing darts. I'm getting paid to do this stuff. And then lo and behold, Bob comes along, and, I'm doing both then. I'm going to school at National Broadcasting. I'm doing an internship. I'm working at the coffee shop, and one thing led to another, and then I wound up getting a career out of it. But it wasn't something I set out to.
Right.
But I don't, and I've had people say, "Well, you got lucky." Well, yeah, I guess I did. Lucky enough to meet somebody who would point me in the right direction.
Mhm.
But what we built, Bob would say he got lucky by meeting me and by meeting Spike.
Yeah.
When you become a group of collaborators like that, we all got lucky by knowing each other.
It's what what's that saying? Like luck is opportunity meets preparation or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Did I nail it? Hopefully I did.
Well, I think you're pretty close, and it is. You have to be prepared for when that moment comes, and you have to be smart enough to know it. And that's something that does frustrate me a little bit. Is a lot of people getting back to the money and things. There's been students who I see just so clearly, what a wonderful opportunity for you, and then I ask them, well, how did that go? Well, they didn't give me as much vacation as I was hoping to get. It's like, okay, it's your gig, but I'm a big believer. Don't let people take advantage of you. But yes is the most important word when you're trying to get somewhere. You have to say yes, and you have to get your foot in that door. Then you can make changes on the way things go. I started working for free because I was dying to do radio. And then I started working for almost free for a long time. And, you worked your way up. But yes is a very important word.
I 100% agree with that. I've had so many not lucky, but just cool opportunities because I've said yes, like going on tour with comedians, becoming a wedding DJ. I literally became a wedding DJ by talking my friend Monica, who's also a podcaster over there in the other room and has been on my show. She got married last year and she wanted me to film her getting married. And then I randomly started talking to the wedding DJ. And then last summer, or the summer we just had, is that last summer? Or I guess whatever the right way to say it is, the summer we just had, right? I did 20 weddings.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it's just like, just say yes, right?
Yeah.
But then, it's interesting though, because at the same time though, I still feel like I'm very isolated where there's very rarely that I'm meeting people out in the world. It's more like I think what someone's doing is super cool and I'm sending them an email or they're coming to me. So I want to find that happy medium because I feel like this is the next chapter of podcasting in Seattle. It's going to be starting here at the studio, in my opinion, where I feel like I'm going to be that person. Because when I got this space, I thought I was going to be that was going to give me legitimacy where other podcasts, studio owners or whatever, are going to reach out to me to give me advice. And I'm really looking at it, and there's not really many other podcast studios in Seattle in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. So whether I thought that was going to happen or not, I'm going to have to be that person that makes it so it's kind of is a beacon in Seattle where people can have that dream of being a podcaster for an affordable price. Not trying to pitch to people, but it's affordable here.
Hey, I think it's a deal. And let me tell you, I will you got my my endorsement. This is a wonderful space and it's convenient. And you're a trailblazer. I mean, you're blazing a trail here. This isn't a trail that has been traveled very often. The World Podcast didn't even really exist 10 years ago. And even now, people are still trying to figure out how to monetize it, how to distribute it.
Yeah.
So it'll be your generation more than mine that'll figure this stuff out. And then you've got a heck of a head start by having this wonderful space. And really, Blake, going back to, you're a person people want to be around because you're a good guy.
Yeah, I try.
Yeah, you're an easygoing guy, and you're a person that kind of emanates, really some sincerity, and I think that's really important. And those are the people, at least in show business, that I've experienced. The biggest stars and things I've ever met are some of the nicest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Because they didn't they didn't get there by being mean to people, you know, and stuff. So
that's crazy you say it, because like I said, I've only been doing this for 4 years, and when I first started, I was getting these big names on my show. And I'd have people who I thought were my idols, and they ended up being D-bags, just to be honest with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I first started my podcast, I would cry after some of my interviews because I was I thought this person was going to be the nicest person in the world, and they were not. And then only fast forward 3 years forward, and some of these people can't even tour anymore. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like that. You need to be nice. Like I've said just hello and been nice to people that like maybe I've been like drunk at an event and I've been nice to them, and people have come up to me and be like, that made my night, whatever you said to me. I'm like, I don't remember what I said, but that I'm happy that I made your night. Like, just be genuinely nice to people.
Yep.
You could be sober and nice, obviously, right?
Oh yeah. That's even better if you're not slobbering.
Yes,
and stuff.
100%.
If you remember.
And I've been nice sober for sure.
Yeah.
But like just being acknowledging people goes a long way. You don't even have to have an in-depth conversation. Just acknowledging that someone exists.
Yep. And while we're throwing out the cliches, I do believe that people don't remember what you said to them, and they do remember how they felt around you. And that's the main thing. If people go, oh, I really, get a good feeling. You made me feel special when you remembered the name. And that's the thing with a radio audience. And I look at our listeners as family, and we did a lot of live events. We would do Christmas concerts and everything, and we would pack in a lot of people. Spike and the Impalers are still playing today and playing all over. And listeners, you remember what their dog is named, or you remember their kid, or you remember that time they called in. That makes them feel so special. And the couple times that maybe I've had a bad day, we used to go sign calendars. We had a calendar they'd put out every year, and we would tour local restaurants and bars. And frankly, some nights after you've been up since 3 a.m. doing a show, you don't want to drive to Arlington and sit and, and I had a couple people go, boy, that Joe is a jerk. He signed my calendar, but he didn't even look up or acknowledge me at all. And I really felt terrible, because when you start to think that you're more important than anybody else because you happen to have the power of a microphone, and then that's when the decline is going to begin. It's I think treating people right and leaving them with a good feeling, super important if you want to be successful in anything.
For sure. So you had those years in radio, and then was that like an automatic pivot to being a radio teacher, or what was that like?
Not at all. We signed off 2015. Yeah, I think 2015. Bob decided he was going to retire. I fully expected that I would probably continue on, and that Spike and I would do a show, and we would keep going as a team. But that wasn't what the company we were working for had in mind. After our last show, they said, Bob, thank you for your service. Joe, thank you for your service. Here's your, go enjoy your life. Don't worry, we're going to pay you for the rest of the year, but we don't need you. They kept Spike. They put him on the sports station for a while. But I fully expected that I would be getting another radio job. So I wasn't looking super hard, but I was applying here and there, and even applying for non-radio jobs. I was thinking about being a flight attendant. In fact, I had gone through a few hoops with Alaska Airlines. I was getting ready for my first live interview. And somebody sent me a message on Facebook, and this was about a year after, and she said, it was a job opening for Mercer Island High to be the radio teacher. Said, this should be your next job. You'd make a great teacher. And that's who I told her. I said, I don't think I can be a teacher. I don't even have a degree. I don't talk about that with my kids much, but I have a vocational certificate. I said, I'm not trained to be any kind of teacher. She goes, no, there's this thing, career technical education. If you are an expert welder, an expert, horticulture person or whatever, you can teach classes in that. And since I was, pretty good at radio and had a lot of experience, that made me qualified to go in there and teach. So I applied for the job and really wanted it, jumped through, speaking of hoops, a lot of letters of recommendation, a lot of verifying my experience and everything. And I go in, Vicki Puckett, the person who was the principal at the time, called me and brought me in for an interview. And I interviewed and got the job. Turns out I was the only person that applied. They were really desperate, but it's worked out. But I had no idea. And that's what I tell people too. You never know where, things are going to be. I never in my life dreamed I would want to be a teacher or even be halfway good at it. In fact, I didn't call myself a teacher for the first few years. I'd say, no, I'm not a teacher. I'm a radio guy. But then I finally realized, no, I'm a teacher. I'm teaching radio, but that's what I'm doing. And I still, I see like in the market right now, I see changes happening, and I see morning shows coming and going. And when people retire, it's like, I should think about getting back in there and throwing my hat in the ring. I mean, we had a great show. And then I think to myself, it's like, no. I've got the best radio job in the city right now. I get to hang out with young people, which I think helps keep me a little bit young. I get to inspire the next generation, and the benefits aren't bad either. You got the teacher. Summers off, not a bad deal. I never had that in my life. Not that I get summers off. We do the Seafair hydroplane races.
Yeah.
We do lots of stuff in the summer. But that wasn't something I set out to do, to be a teacher. But I'm sure glad it found me.
Was there any resentment building up to when you were able to start in radio at the high school, or was it like a quick enough turnaround where like you were like, this is the next step? Because I know when I was talking to Jose, he felt like he's still with the station, which is cool, but like he definitely thought there might be like a change in his position once Jubal left. When there wasn't, he was kind of confused about that, and like now he's works in radio still, but he's also like a streamer. He's been doing comedy again as well, and like all that stuff, which I feel like in my business mind is like, okay, you're doing this also so that you have an audience, so that you can pitch that when you want to have your own show eventually. Because he was talking about hopefully having his own show, and I just think that's a perfect comparison, because third mic.
Yeah.
Right? So what was that like thought process like when there wasn't an immediate like, okay, here's the Downtown Joe show?
Well, resentment is a big word, and I will say I felt a little bit of it. Because you do put 25 years of your life into a brand. And that's one thing I do tell my students too, is you might want to think about getting your name on the show, because it was the Bob Rivers show, even though it was Bob, Spike, and Joe for 25 years. It's essentially Bob's show. So if people aren't in the know, like in the industry and stuff, and there's a reason that show's in the Hall of Fame, it's mostly because of the great things Bob has done. So a guy in New York goes, oh yeah, I know Bob Rivers. Well, when Bob Rivers retires, that all kind of goes away. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why can't I keep doing this? And it's like, no, thank you for your service. The Bob Rivers show is now done.
Yeah.
And I did feel, I don't know if it's resentment, but it's like, wait a minute. I'm pretty dang good at this. And I've got a track record to prove it with the ratings and everything. But it wasn't Joe Bryant doing that. It was the ensemble of us. And I started scratching my head about, why am I not getting a morning show? Why am I not getting this? But I didn't live in that space for too long.
Right.
The further away I got from getting up at 3 a.m, the further away I got from sitting at a card table in a car dealership parking lot and giving away stickers in a driving rainstorm, the further away I got from that, I thought to myself, well, there is something else out there. And I'm a person of faith. I don't, I'm not I don't sit and read the Bible every night. I don't really even call myself of any particular religion, but I am a person of somebody out up there is looking out for us. As long as you're doing good and once again treating people well, the path will find itself, as long as you're kind of proactively looking.
Yeah.
So I knew something was coming. I didn't know what it was, but I was happy when it came. And I don't think it ever is healthy to sit there and stew about what could have been, or or what should have been. There's a lot of people who get into the I wasn't treated fairly or whatever. Okay, so you weren't. Move on, because sitting there talking about that isn't going to get you anywhere.
Yeah. So what do you see like the changes in the radio industry in Seattle? What I've noticed is like you're starting to see people retire, like Danny Bonaducci. Let's just name someone, right? There's people retiring, right? But you look at these people, and that guy was on what, Little House on the Prairie? Or
he was on the Partridge Family.
My bad. But I'm saying like that's a show my grandma watched, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying a lot of these radio hosts are like they're in their 60s or older, and I don't feel like or even Brooke and Well, not Brooke and Jeffrey, right?
Yeah.
They both have families. Brooke has kids.
Yeah.
Like Jose's in his mid-30s. Like they're all reaching almost 40. They have a fourth mic named Alexis, who's I think she's my age. Might be the exact same age. But you're not really seeing like young people enter radio in Seattle. From my experience, at least, I try to connect with all the various stations that I can, and it just seems like it's cool to see my friends in their 30s getting these promotions to different roles in radio, but it seems like it's just the same people that are just continues to move their way up. But what happens with the younger people? So and then in turn, what happens to radio?
Right. Well, what's happened, and that's why they are in a challenging space, is radio was a little slow to embrace the internet. A lot of the revenue, I mean, let's go back to the dark ages, and you weren't even alive for these, but before the internet, radio was kind of king. We were the gatekeepers. If you wanted to get your song heard, if you wanted to get your mattresses sold or your car sold, there was no internet or anything, to advertise on. It was the newspaper, it was a billboard in the sky, or it was the radio. So that brought in a tremendous amount of revenue. Radio was a cash business and a good one. And these stations were billing a lot of money. Well, this little company called Google came to town, and the internet came, and all of a sudden, you can target your ads to a specific audience. If you want to reach men 25 to 34 that might be interested in buying the new Camaro from Blankety Motors in Auburn, Google can send a targeted ad to every guy doing a search for that car for you for a fraction of the cost that radio is. Radio is broadcasting. It's raw. You're throwing a message out there, see if it sticks, who might hear. So when that dynamic changed, radio was slow to go to the internet. So the revenue started to erode. There's one thing that happened.
Because it's commercial radio.
Right, it's commercial radio. So then, consequently, a big ensemble show like ours, where you have 6 or 7 people, you have a big overhead, where if you're billing a few million a year, then it's okay to have a show that might cost you a couple million a year. But if the billing goes away, some of the people go away. And where we're at right now, in fact, last week, Odyssey, which is a company it used to be called Intercom, they filed Chapter 11.
You worked for them.
I worked for them.
AUD. And
then here in Seattle, that's KISW and a few other stations. Well, one of the big things that just happened in morning radio, and by the way, BJ Shea, the greatest guy you'll ever meet, and just a friend and a prince of a guy. He lives on Mercer Island, in fact. Well, BJ has been doing a great show at KISW for a long time. And in fact, we did it for 10 years. He's done on way longer than that. So long that his daughter was on the show. His son was on the show. Steve Miggs was on the show. Then I don't know this is all speculation. I don't know any of this, but the bottom line is, when your company is going Chapter 11 and going bankrupt, you have to start making some cuts. So they had a big show, great show, but a pretty decent sized payroll too. And so BJ, you mentioned Danny Bonaducci retiring.
Yeah.
BJ Shea is now the host of the BJ and Sarah morning show on KZOK. So BJ has gone to KZOK, and his daughter, Sarah, is staying at KISW. So the two great rock morning shows now in Seattle are BJ and then his daughter with Steve Miggs and everything. And I don't know how we got going down this road, but the economics of radio are just making it a little more challenging. And for young people to want to get into it, well, first they have to decide radio is cool. And frankly, I don't think a lot of them are, and I don't know if I blame them. Why would you want to sit and listen to 10 minutes of commercials to get a song if you can go on Spotify or whatever, and you can just discover new music all day long with a minimum of commercials? And so that's one reason you see a lot of the same people that keep doing it, but the business climate makes it so less young people are interested. And then I'm going to totally contradict myself, because there are things that young people are interested in that there's going to be a huge demand for. Sports play-by-play, news reporting, all that stuff is still vital, and the traditional radio frequency still seems to be a great venue for that sort of stuff.
So has Seattle always kind of been like a smaller market compared to like an LA or New York though? Because like I don't know how much you know about like the Breakfast Club with like Charlemagne.
Oh yeah,
but like like they were one of the first radio stations to adopt online interviews where there's like video.
Exactly.
Of it, right? If Seattle radio stations do that, do you think they were more late to the ball with that, or what?
Well, I guess in doing it well, because if you look back, you go to bobrivers.com, you'll see 10 years worth. We were doing all our shows on video, all through the 2000s. I mean, our KZOK, that whole decade is on video. Now, we didn't know much about what to do with it or anything. We were just streaming it on video and kind of experimenting with it. But Charlemagne and Howard Stern and people at shows like that.
Isn't your radio station connected to Howard Stern? Well, KISW? Like it was one of the syndicated or something.
If you really wanted me to go into the weeds here, and maybe I should, well, I guess it's all old news now, but the way Howard came to KISW was we were on KISW, and it was at the time owned by Intercom, which is now Odyssey. So I'm not going to name boss names and stuff, but somebody at CBS Radio decided that we had a very good show and that it would sound very good on KZOK, the classic rock station. And we were not getting younger, we were getting older. We'd spent a decade on the, active rock station. And these guys are perfect for the classic rock station. So CBS at the time also controlled Howard Stern. A guy named Mel Carmazon was the guy who ran CBS Radio, and he had Howard under contract. So the deal was made, so legend has it, that KZOK took our show, the whole show, gave us all very generous raises, but the caveat was we have to sit out a year. So we had to sit out a year. We got paid. I didn't miss any meals, but we sat out a year, and they put Howard on KISW. So basically they said, okay, if we're going to lose this show, so what they did is they took us from Intercom, and then they sold Intercom Howard to put him on for a year. And we gave him a year head start. And
so he could build up his ratings.
Yeah, so he could build up his ratings. Okay. If we weren't around, people were looking for something to listen to. So Howard was on for a year, and then we came back. And we beat Howard, which is, but it's, Howard Stern is New York, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm more talented than Howard Stern. The guy is a genius, and he has become such a great interviewer. Now, what he does is nothing like what he did then. But we came back on, we got the ratings back, and then Intercom decided we need to get a local show, and they went with another show. I think they were Rob, Arnie, and Dawn. They lasted a little while. Then they took BJ, who was on a station called The Buzz, put him on in the mornings, and he was great. And sooner or later, he started beating us, and then that's when we, CBS, said, all right, you guys are pretty expensive, and now you're getting beat. So then we had to find another place to go. So we went to what was called Clear Channel, now iHeartRadio, and went to KJR. So I guess the life cycle, Blake, is when you're younger, you're at one station talking to younger people. Then we were lucky enough to get older and still be in the business. We went to classic rock, slightly older demos. And then our last stop, at the time we went, it was branded as an oldies station. It was like, oh man, I'm on an oldies station. That does not sound good. And we did get that changed. We got rid of that oldies brand, but that's kind of the way that went, and the rest is history. But Seattle has always been a great radio market. There's some legends, Pat O'Day and Gary Lockwood. I moved here when I was 10, and I listened to a little transistor radio, KJR 95. It was a AM station, and some of the very best radio talent of any market in any city came from Seattle. But getting back to your question about Charlemagne, when you're in New York or in LA, you have just a wealth of people to draw from. You can have people coming by every day. There's always a big concert in New York every single night. There's always a big professional team, you know. So it's easier to do a syndicated show when you have access to the stars. There's a reason that Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel and these guys are all based in New York or LA. It's easy to get people to come by and visit and get talent. When we were up here in Seattle was a little bit more the boonies. I mean, you know, it's grown a lot. Microsoft was really a big part of that in the 90s. When Microsoft took off, Seattle became, you know, a much more relevant city. And then we had Amazon and Starbucks and all that. But before that, it was a little harder to get people interested in coming on a radio show in Seattle.
Right. But I feel like KEXP kind of does it well.
KEX, they were one of the first to embrace the internet, and they're, I don't know, you know, what kind of numbers they're driving these days, but they had a worldwide audience before that was a thing, just from great music curation. And that's the other thing that radio is really missing. You have just a small handful of companies, and they make these cookie cutter formats. And you've got one guy in Dallas that's programming every classic rock station in the country, and it's the same Led Zeppelin and Foreigner and Boston songs over and over and over. Yeah. KEXP is something where they're carefully curating music. They're exposing you to new artists. They're doing themes, and I think it was really David Bowie passed away, and I think the anniversary of that was recently. I don't know when. We may not see this for a year, but that just happened, the anniversary. And when Bowie died, KEXP was the station that could go nonstop, David Bowie, and you could listen to that. That wasn't happening on the other stations in town because, frankly, they didn't really have the capability. They couldn't turn on a dime because they're being programmed by some guy out there somewhere. The music logs are made a month in advance, and it takes a lot of the art out of it. It takes a lot of the connection with the audience out of it.
So you were able to like break some bands though, right? You were able to like interview bands. How did that get incorporated into your show?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, our time at KISW was literally from Bob signed on August of 1989, and then we signed off in the end of the 90s. We spent the 90s at KSW. Now, you weren't around, but you know what happened in this town in the 90s?
Nirvana, Pearl Jam, all these guys.
You know where it happened, by the way, a lot of it?
Where?
Right next door to your studio here at the Central Tavern. Alice in Chains at the Central Tavern. Pearl Jam at the off-ramp. So this whole thing was happening, you know, while we were on KISW, the rock station. So I don't think we were necessarily breaking bands, and it really wasn't our morning show. We had a guy, Damon Stewart, the new music guru, and Kathy Faulkner and Mike Jones. Those were the music, and Steve Young, rest in peace, the greatest program director I think I ever worked for, him and Kerry Kurlop, who was at KZOK. But these guys were starting to play that music, especially Damon. You know, Kurt Cobain and these guys are hanging out at the station. I thought nothing of it because, once again, I'm using every bit of my vacation to follow Jerry Garcia around, and I'm getting up at 3 a.m. So I didn't see nearly as much of it as like the people that were doing the nighttime shows and stuff. But we finally started doing this thing. Bob Rivers, just an amazing producer. I mean, the Twisted Tunes that he's done are just the best. And he's a musician. He's a keyboard player. And this happened kind of oddly, but Blue Oyster Cult was doing a show in Bremerton, and they wanted us to promote the show, and they wanted us to come to a record store to do an in-store appearance with them. So we get a few people out there. And I know this isn't a Seattle band. Trust me, this is going somewhere. So I told Bob, I said, my friend's promoter, his name was Brad Zirkle, great guy. I said, he's bringing Blue Oyster Cult to Bremerton, and we could go hang out with him in the record store. It'd be really cool. And Bob says, well, I'll go hang out with them at a record store if they'll come play at my house. And he lived out in North Bend. And Brad, once again, a guy who's like, well, he goes, let me see. I'll go ask him. And so sure enough, he talked them into coming out, and they were the first to do a concert series called Bob's Garage. So we would bring them out to North Bend, literally to a garage. And Blue Oyster Cult recorded. They did, Don't Fear the Reaper, Godzilla, all this stuff. And it became a thing. And we mostly started with older bands, because this was before the casinos came too. Older bands were playing places like the Ballard Firehouse and these little clubs. Bands like Blue Oyster Cult and Foghat and the Outlaws and these 70s rock bands, and they were struggling. Best thing that ever happened to those bands was casinos, because now they can go and pack a casino and get paid really well. But at that time, they do just about anything to get the word out about their shows. So we were talking them into coming out to Bob's house, and you can listen to this stuff online. You just search Bob's Garage. And then it evolved to these younger Seattle bands and stuff that wanted to get their music on the radio. And our Steve Young and Kathy Faulkner would go, well, if you would go out there and record an exclusive custom track at Bob's house, we will play the heck out of it. So then we started getting like Queens of the Stone Age and who else was out there? Grunt Truck and some of these local bands and younger things, Queensryche and then we got Paul Rogers, Kenny Wayne Shepherd. All these people would come out and record. So we weren't breaking records. We weren't really there, but we were kind of in the middle of this whole, Seattle was the center of the musical universe for a little while, and we were right in the center of the musical universe. And the fact that Bob had a recording studio made it so, we got a chance to really do some cool stuff with a lot of people. And the one I always see the kids in the Nirvana shirts. I never knew, Kurt, but I did see one Nirvana show, and it was very good. It was at the down on the waterfront in this warehouse, and they recorded it for MTV.
Wow.
And it was Nirvana in Cypress Hill. It was supposed to be Nirvana Pearl Jam in Cypress Hill, and Pearl Jam decided this was their anti-MTV years, and they bailed at the very last moment. We didn't even know they bailed, and I was in the industry, and I'm in line, and then word starts circulating, I guess Pearl Jam's not going to play tonight. And it's like, well, I'm already here, and I really went to see Pearl Jam, but that's the only Nirvana show I ever saw. But that's the one people talk about leading the way, and yes, they really did. But there were, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, all these bands, all happening at the same time and happening in these clubs at the Central Tavern and Rock Candy and so I didn't get to live that as fully. That's one thing I don't live, like I said, with regrets or anything, but I probably said no to a few concerts I should have gone to because I was like, I got to get up too early. I just don't, I don't know. I've seen Pearl Jam. I think I'll pass on this one, kind of thing. And it's like, I should have been doing a little more of that, at the time.
So did you ever actually meet the Grateful Dead, or how did that?
Well, I've had the opportunity to meet and interview Bob Weir, and I got to bring him on stage at the Temple Theater in Tacoma. I've interviewed Mickey Hart and Phil Lesh. I never got to meet Jerry Garcia or interview Jerry or even really. I mean, I've shared the same space as a fan, and the longer I stayed in the industry, the more I thought about, I don't think I want to meet Jerry Garcia.
The idol thing.
Yeah, somebody needs somebody to, to kind of idolize. And I think meeting Jerry might have, maybe it would have diminished it, maybe not. I never got the chance to find out because he passed on in 1995. But most of the other members I have at least had a conversation with. And going back to my student Sam, he just had the original keyboard player on for the Dead 2 weeks ago, Tom TC, and he was the first keyboard player. So so there's a few still out there. And
nice. I got a couple more questions for you. I know you're a busy guy. A big thing for me, I always ask people who've been in Seattle for a while, what do you think has changed with like the music industry in Seattle, especially from like a radio personality's perspective? Why there's so many, like majority of my friends since graduating high school are artists, right? And it's hard for me to see a lot of my friends who are talented not know what the next steps are for them, right? And I'm in a position where I'm a podcaster, I can have my friends on, but like if they're not able to get broken or whatever, right? Like my show can only do so much. I found a way to be creative and make money from it, but it's a total different avenue than a musician. So what do you think has changed from I guess the golden era of Seattle's music scene to what's going on currently? Whether you're directly involved in what's going on in Seattle's music right now or more on the outside now?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely put me far on the outside. I'm very out of touch. But I can tell you some things that have changed is just like I was mentioning earlier, radio was the gatekeepers to fame before. Now anybody with a phone, the barrier for entry to make a podcast, to make a song, you don't need a 24-track Neve board. You don't need this huge. We used to have to record everything analog tape. It was a very expensive process to even make one song. And now GarageBand or whatever the latest tools are, the creativity can flow much easier than it used to and be captured at a pretty high quality. But that being said, that means there's a lot more clutter out there to find the quality. There's it's a lot easier to record a song, so that means there's going to be a lot more. It's a lot easier to make a podcast, so there's going to be a lot more. So I'm a believer that quality content will rise to the top and will be found, but it can be a little more difficult to be found. But when I fancy myself a pretty good eye for talent and a pretty good ear. There's a musician in Seattle, Aaron Jones, and the first time Aaron ever played was on our show, and he, in fact, was it my 40th birthday? Aaron came in and played Hey Joe, and it was so cool.
Yeah, I was in Texas with him last year.
Oh, were you?
Last May, yeah.
And I'm so proud to see his accomplishments. He's opening for the Rolling Stones in Paris. He is a bona fide rock star touring the world, and that's all Aaron ever wanted to be, and that's what he is. And that started by playing at the Edgewater Inn, just going in there and plugging in a little amp. That's where I first started seeing him play. Now he has gone and he's got himself a record deal. He's got all that, but it took a lot of grinding, and that's not as traditional of a route as it used to be. There's another band I'm really a booster of. It's called Pantsuit Guy. Okay. And it's a girl named Juliet up in Bellingham, and she is making music basically in her room up in Bellingham, and it is good, and the songs are catchy.
Check them out.
And check out Pantsuit Guy. She's down in LA right now, but it's just a homegrown, what do you call it? Really organic kind of thing. Now, will she find the level of fame that Aaron does? I don't know. And even Aaron, it's a tough business. Even people, and I know a lot of people, in the business just as friends, even people in bands that are, household names, legendary names, it's still tough to get out there and do it for a job, I got my royalty check for, we did song parodies for Atlantic Records. And by the way, that's one thing I'll say too. If you're a songwriter, write some stuff about the holidays because they come every year. The Twisted Christmas records sell a little bit every year. And I get a tiny bit, just a tiny bit for songwriting, which isn't even songwriting. It's just joke writing because it's parodies. But boy, that check was small this year. And I think that, everybody talks about, I've got 2 million streams on Spotify or whatever. Well, that just isn't translating to a lot of money right now. So I think it's changed in the sense that anybody can put stuff out there, but there's more of it now. So it's getting to be a little harder to find the good stuff. And then it's even harder to take that good stuff and monetize it in a way that you can get paid. With that being said, I cannot believe what people are paying to go see a concert or go see a comedy show these days or something. Now $100 is like kind of low price to go see
100%.
a band or something, whereas I never would dream of paying $100. I remember when I bought a ticket to Led Zeppelin for $10, and I'm like, who do these guys think they are? The Beatles? I mean, it's like, so I think there must be getting to be a ton of money being made in live performance. Now, is that going to the artist? I don't know, because it takes a lot of trucks of stuff. And I think Taylor Swift, we should all look to her for the model of how to do this. Have good songs, try to own your own stuff. And I guess she had to, I don't know the whole story, but she had to kind of re-record and kind of get re-control. And then she mounts these big tours, and she is on her way to being a billionaire.
Yeah.
And she did it starting with great songs, so great songs is where it starts. And I think she did it, and I'm no Taylor Swift expert, but by being nice and appreciating her audience and interacting with her audience, and not putting herself up on some castle on the hill and kind of thing. And I'm optimistic that there is going to be a bit of a reckoning as far as being able to take your music and actually make a living. Because I know, like you said, you need 3 different jobs, and it's a gig economy. Most people that are working in bands locally in Seattle might be in 3 different ones, just to keep enough going to keep going.
Yeah. So with that, what is some advice that you would give to like up and coming podcasters, radio personalities, artists? Besides, obviously, the gig economy is a real thing. Like, what is something that you tell your students that take it seriously,
Yeah, well, and we've hit on some of these things already, but once again, be a great person, be a person people want to hang around. Prepare. Don't just go in there and wing it. Whatever you're doing, go in there with a plan. The more you prepare. I love Pete Carroll, and we
check out the podcast.
Yeah. Pete Carroll he's taking a different role at the Seahawks, but the separation is in the preparation. That's Russell Wilson. That's Pete Carroll, and it really is. If you want to separate yourself from the pack, you need to be well prepared, and getting back to a little bit of being prepared when that opportunity comes. So be prepared, be creative. Don't beat yourself up, because you're always going to have failures. Fail forward is one of my favorite sayings. Every time something doesn't go your way, don't dwell on it, but do look at it, reflect on it. Why didn't that go my way? What can I do differently the next time? Nobody ever came out and wrote the perfect song. Nobody ever came out and was an immediate movie star or anything. Everybody has some ups and some downs. And I know people love the word grind, and you do need to grind, in the sense that if you've got a dream and you want to follow that dream, it's not going to be a super clear path sometimes. So
for sure,
you need to put in your time. You need to remember to treat everybody around you just as if they might be your boss someday, and because they might. That's another thing with radio and anything. Once you get to be, quote, a star or whatever, those interns of yours, treat them good, because you might be working for them someday. So those are the kind of things I would say. I don't think there's any magic way to find fame and fortune, or to get your stuff heard, other than if you sit there and you do something that people appreciate, and you do it long enough, and you do it consistently, and you figure out a way to cut through the clutter so it can be heard. And maybe that one lucky thing will happen. Maybe you get that guest on your show that, does go viral to the point to where, holy cow, 4 million people have seen my podcast or heard my song. Then you try to use that as a catalyst to make it happen again. But I don't think there's a magic formula to it. And if I knew that formula, maybe I wouldn't be teaching at Mercer High School. Not that I don't love it, but maybe I would be doing that.
Oh my gosh. So with that, is there anything you want to promote before we're out of here? Or?
No, I
Cool.
mean, I'm just thrilled to sit down with you,
Yeah.
Blake. Like I said, I'm proud of everything you're doing. I'll
Thank you.
promote this space. If anybody is looking to do a podcast, I highly recommend Blake. He's a great producer, a great
Thank you.
guy,
Thank
somebody
you.
you will enjoy being around. And if you could check out KMIH.org, that's our little student station. We're kind of the little station that could. We're a 30-watt station, as we say, small station, big attitude, big ideas, and some high school students that are making what I think is some of the best radio in the city, and I'll even go so far as to say in the country. We've got a lot of kids winning awards, the New York Times Podcast Awards and national awards, and I'm super proud of what they do. So if there's anything I want to promote, it's check out KMIH.org. If you are in Seattle and you're and you're within range of our transmitter, we're at 88.9 FM. Give it a listen. Let us know what you think.
Heck yeah. I'm happy that I could highlight you on my show. Like I said, you're a huge inspiration for everything I've been able to do. When I was in high school, my senior year was very rough for me. I'd moved out of my house while still in high school, and I needed to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And radio was one of those classes I decided to take seriously. And now here we are. So thank you. You inspire me more than you know. And I think I did a good job not swearing on this episode. So hopefully your kids can watch this episode.
Yes. And that was one thing. I'll tell one little story about Blake is he used the studios not always for FCC friendly material. And I caught him one day doing your own kind of song parodies. It was to
Little Nas X.
Little Nas X. You had your own version, and it was very profane, but it was also very good. And I told Blake, I said, I do not want to hear you do that, but it's pretty good. I'm not saying don't do it. Just don't let me hear it because you're going to get me in trouble, son. But it was really great, and that's what makes me proud to have alumni like you that have come through. And if I'm getting a little older. I'm 60 now. If I can look back, and I know you're going to have success because you have what it takes, and I know there's so many, and that is my success. The 25 years of radio I did were great, but the true success I have is seeing my daughter become a good person and successful, seeing my students become a good people and have success and happy in what they do. So keep it up. And once again, if you need to do a podcast, this is the spot to do it right here.
Thank you so much. This has been the NAST podcast with
Joe Bryant.
And we did it.